25. Our first agenda item will be to approve the meeting, adopt the meeting minutes from last week, 3/5/2025. Do I have anyone that moves to adopt?
Hang on
I'll
one
move to adopt.
second. Sorry, hang on, let me get the slide up. 1 second. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Trina. I wanted to be able to write down who moved.
Okay. Does anyone move to adopt the meeting minutes for 3/5?
I'll move to adopt the minutes.
Thank you, Sachin. And does anyone second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Susan.
I have a quick question. I never received the minutes from the 3/5 meeting.
So everything gets posted on that PAC webpage. Do we want to vote, or do we want to postpone a vote till the end so you have a chance to look at it?
I'd be okay to vote.
Okay.
Everyone in favor? All right. And anyone opposed? I think we can go ahead and adopt the minutes for last week.
Great, thank you. Let me expecting a couple more people. Oh, it looks like, okay, they're in the, hang on. I need to promote them. We have a few people joining at different times tonight, so it might be a little confusing for me. I have to let them into the room. So does not look like Deborah Kafori is here yet. So I'm trying to add Kristen Johnson. She is here. She's not doing it. So in the meeting materials that are posted on the PAC webpage, we have some written comments. They're combined, and there's 2 postings. There was some that I added today. At the end of the meeting, I think we'll have some more time to bring them into the conversation. When Deborah joins us, I wanted her to address some of the overarching questions about like the timeline and how funds can be used. But I'm gonna move on and come back to that because we do have one of our other guests here, Kristen. Let me go forward in the slides. So this, I'm not going to go over this right now, but I did add that community building was added. That was somebody recommended that we add that to our criteria, and we can return to this in our discussion at the end as well. Kind of changing the order a bit here because based on who's here. So Kristen, would you be able to jump in and talk about the educational assistance?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. Robin, I am the fiscal operations manager overseeing all of special revenue here at PPS. So this bucket of funding would come under my team for the technical support in terms of accounting. And one question that was raised when the list of ideas was put forward was about these educational assistants and the cost of these positions. So in our budgeting process, we use the average base salaries when we're talking about future state, right? Because it's dependent on the individual. The average base salary next year for an educational assistant and a full-time educational assistant in PPS is 0.875 FTE, is about $51,000. Our fringe rate right now, which is our PERS, it is our health, it is disability, all of those components is at about 33% next year. And then the average health insurance for a PFSP employee is about $20,000. So all in average cost for the year for one EA in PPS is about $88,000, just over. With that amount, based on the $1 million, we could safely estimate about 11 FTE. I say 11 because of the average cost, right? Some folks might come in higher because of their experience within PPS. So that's about 11 FTE total that could be added with $1 million into the fiscal 26 school year. And it is not uncommon with some of these types of allocated FTE to split fund. So it could be an EA in 11 different buildings or split in between two buildings. So each building would get a half-time EA to support their students and their community. There is some components about this. So I've, looped in folks from human resources and others to ensure that we're in compliance with all our union agreements and other pieces, especially when we're talking about large budget cuts. Many of these EAs they're going to be, as we identified in some other public communications, EAs cut in fiscal year 26. And so because of our union agreement and seniority ranking, if we were to add back 11 EAs, it could mean that it is pulling back stuff that were cut with other resource reductions. So they'll be reassigned to these buildings that are identified. We would work with our research assessment and accountability team to look at the different modeling scenarios to allocate these FTE and what options are available. They have recommended that this is the selected option, that we align it with fall balancing when we have true enrollment numbers in September. One thing to be aware of, right, is that our costs go up every year. Folks have step and COLA raises, fringe might go up, healthcare might go up. So on average, when we're thinking about a long-term investment like an EA, right? Because we don't want to put folks in buildings for 1 year and then have them reduced again the next year. That's always not always the best for a community. To be considering that the average increase per year is about 6% for that step COLA. So this cost would go up annually as you're also trying to potentially add more. So one thing to factor in. Any questions about this slide? Great.
I have a question, Kristen. Sorry, I
Yeah.
just wasn't entirely clear. If you could repeat it, what you said this had an effect on the teacher's allocation in the schoolroom, in the classroom. I was unclear on the relationship between the EA and the effect on the teacher assignment.
No, so it's actually EA assignments. So within the PFSP contract, there's also a seniority. So folks are owed positions if there was a reduction in budget. And so if we added them back, there might be the implication from HR is not necessarily that the principal would go out and hire someone new. They might be assigned someone who was laid off or their position was reduced because of budget cuts. And so they are now owed a position. So an EA who's already worked for the district might be placed in one of the buildings that is in the equity model allocation. So it has
Got it.
not much to do with teachers. It's within their own PFSP contract for that.
Perfect. I thought I heard teachers and I was trying to figure out how the EA would affect the teachers, but I must have just misheard. Thank you.
No problem.
Kristen, I have a question. You had mentioned about the enrollment balancing that takes place at the beginning of the school year. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on how that might impact, like if we were to use this money to fund EAs, how could that create issues?
Yeah. So when we are right, we just completed staffing in our buildings this past week. We're kind of wrapping up that process for next year. When we are identifying staffing that goes public about this time of year, it's using estimated enrollment numbers. So we work with folks from Portland State University to kind of define and look at all the disaggregated data around our enrollment and our trends and our population changes. When we get to the fall, there's always a balancing we do in the fall because what we think might happen, right? There's always other things that come into play. And so we do a fall balancing that makes sure our class sizes are within reason, that we don't need to add or remove folks and based on where students actually ended up in the enrollment count. So we look at actual enrollment in September, kind of give it the first couple weeks of school year to settle. And then we rebalance in the fall to ensure that we're meeting all of our requirements in terms of staff to student ratios. So the recommendation out of the RAA team when I started opening up this idea of, making sure all the right folks were in the room around this consideration to be aware and support this kind of implementation if this was the direction this committee went with, was that it was recommended that we wait, that if we did this, it might be in the best interest to do it in the fall when we have actual enrollment data. Why that might change is some of those levers that we use in our allocating like equity and other resources, right? Schools get equity allocations, they get these instructional coaches and interventionists now. Some of those ratios might adjust. And so we just have clear data to give you the most informed decision-making around how these positions could be allocated in the fall. That's helpful.
Thanks, Kristen. I just put the second slide there too that has some estimates if we were to put a goal out there for having an EA in every building. Did you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, so using this estimated cost, and right, we need to factor in 88,000 is for the fiscal year 26. We're going to see that number increase every year in total cost as cost of living, step increases, fringe rates, health insurance, all those numbers factor into an individual's cost to the district. So we're just using this 88,000 as our benchmark for next year. For next year, if we had wanted to add all 83 FTE to meet our 83 core programs in schools, it would be about $7.3 million. So to add half of that, about 42 FTE, which would be a half-time EA in every building, it's about $3.7 million. Of course, over time, that number is going to increase annually to align with our step and COLA increases. But just to give you a frame of reference, if this is the direction this committee wanted to go in fiscal year 26, and also kind of the strategic fundraising goals, 7 million is what you would need to put, 7.3 million to put a full-time EA in every building, with roughly a 6% increase annually of that amount. One thing being from Grant World, especially in our current environment, right? Things are right now. And so one thing we always talk about in Grant World when we're talking about utilizing these resources that are very valuable to our schools, right? They're the most flexible typically, is to really consider long-term investments. So not be siloed to 1 year at a time, but how as a body in a school that can support a community, how would that be maintained long-term? Other resources can sometimes be somewhat unstable, and we've seen that happening, and we're kind of seeing it happen now. So really having a conversation with our budget holders and our principals around what is the long-term investment plan that are in alignment with our labor agreements. And one thing to note about this is our 83 main schools and programs. So it includes programs like Alliance or MLC, but it does not include smaller alternative programs. So if those wanted to be added into this conversation, that number would go up. And we're talking like DART and some of our multiple pathways to graduation programs. Any questions here about this slide or anything else? I'm here to poke some of questions or wonderings about what EAs would look like.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
So that also means that, so obviously we don't have enough money to do either one of those concepts, but even if we were to hire 11, we would have to make sure that there were that amount of donations moving forward every year, or else we then start to have to let go people who we had just hired the year before.
Yes. And that is that long-term investment planning. Is this a 1-year stopgap to support schools while they're seeing reductions in other areas? Or is this a long-term investment strategy that you all as the new committee want to make? And so that would be a consideration. Even if you maintained the 11 FTE at roughly $1 million, right? It would be $1 million plus 6% next year. So 1.6 million, right? So that number will increase over time. And then as you want to also add FTE, that would be a factor in kind of some of your fundraising goals to ensure we hit that benchmark to maintain these EA positions, or it would be a reduction at the school sites in the following fiscal.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. We appreciate your time and
I'm sorry, I have one last question. I had my hand up, sorry. I just wanted to highlight that or ask the question, that isn't necessarily different from, and you may not be privy to the other presentations, but educational assistance investing in would not be different than the need for the long-term view for any of the other ones. I mean, investing in programs would be right now we're looking at 1-year funding, and I'm interested in how we can expand this conversation to make that funding more stable forever and, create a pipeline. So right now we're just talking about 1 year, but how can we grow that so there is that stability? But this is not unique to the educational assistant role, because all of these programs would be funded, and the educational, it sounds like we're actually able to, if we kept 11, it would be people who are effectively being laid off right now. We'd keep 11 jobs for at least 1 year. Is that right?
Yes, if they hadn't already found alternate roles, right, they would be on the list to call back first. Yes, there would be a kind of this layoff owed positions list from HR, and I don't have the full details on that. Those would be HR questions that I'd be happy to relay and have some answers for you regarding that process. I think the difference, you're right, that any investment, unless that is continued funding and you anticipate at least raising that minimum annually to maintain it, it would be a 1 year investment. I think the difference here is, right, these are humans, these are people in chairs. And we know that it's really hard for a community to have someone that shows up and really supports and gets involved and then get pulled 1 year to the next. So that's just the added layer of, you're right, universally, these are all potentially just 1 year investments unless you can maintain. However, these are humans as well, people in chairs. So a layer to this. Also, one other component of special revenue that we talk a lot about in my world and what we always relay, regardless, it comes out of our federal kind of compliance requirements, but I think it's valuable across any special resource, is the idea about necessary and reasonable. And this is something that we get from it's a federal requirement when we use federal dollars. So when we talk about Title 1A or other things, the principals always have to factor in, is this potential expense necessary and reasonable? And within that, there's these components of like student impact. How many students would it impact in the greater good? How much in dollar per student impacted? So there's those components as well to be factoring, just as you're looking generally. Speaking as the special revenue expert here, like that is regardless of what selection is made, I recommend thinking from that lens of the number of students supported and this necessary and reasonable clause. What is necessary and reasonable to invest in with that long-term investment plan? Just as an idea, and I'm happy to continue supporting these conversations in any way I can. So.
Great, thank you so much. We need to move to Carmen Williams because she needs to leave at 6 for another meeting. So if I have more questions for you, Kristen, I will get them to you via email so that you don't have to stay till the end of the meeting. But thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
All right, Carmen, I think I have your slide up there if you want to go.
Good evening, all. And I have a meeting that was already set for 6 p.m., but I'm waiting for the link. So it's possible I get the link a few minutes late and then I have a few minutes extra. So I just wanted to put this out there as chatting with Robin. And one of the things that is number one, a huge need. Number two, is essential for a community school model are of course wraparound services, but food insecurity has been huge. And so I had recently actually applied for the Portland Children's Levy grant for hunger relief, and it wasn't accepted because they confused me with some other things, and I have some big feelings. I'm going to be writing them back. But this is part of the grant proposal, and it was to help the community schools launch a pantry or resource a pantry they have currently going, or improve a pantry that's just a closet, something on that level. And then also we have a couple partners willing to do cooked meals, especially for unhoused individuals and families. So those are two areas of focus for us. We already have infrastructure worked out on how to run the pantries, who would do that days a week, space, as well as delivering meals when we need to. It's a matter of just the resource to get these going. And I was listening, I was a part of the end part of Krista Johnson's when she was presenting, and I, as principal, I do, whenever I would do a staffing model or a multi-year, everything was a multi-year plan. Nothing was a 1 year plan. This is something that there's a lot of frontlining costs would not be required every year to keep going, because some schools just need shelving. Some schools need refrigerators, right? Some people need to launch the partnership. And then as we start to launch more and more donation sites and all of that and work with other partners, of course, the monetary piece behind it subsides a bit. Also on here, you'll see two options. We have some garden programs in schools, and gardens are frankly not well maintained, but could be a whole nother level. Be integrated into the school core curriculum, could be community activities. We could do, this farm to table kind of deal, which that's something I was doing at Fabian. Nutritional programming, science programming. There's a lot of benefits to community gardening, and it can be moved to a more culturally specific activity quite easily. And it's actually incredibly fun when you do that. And so that's called out here as well. And I've also found it to be really powerful when we have our different ethnic and cultural groups come together to run cooking classes, to help in our gardens, to make sure our pantries are resourced appropriately in a culture specific way. And they start to engage and show up to the school more in a different way. And so it's just so surprising how food is such a uniting force, but it really is. And it's such a huge need. The number of families experiencing houselessness is skyrocketing in Portland. And I know you see it in the news, you hear about it. But I work pretty closely also with Path Home, and just the data they presented a couple weeks ago, which is really mind-boggling. So that's something I've heard for consideration and for chat and thinking and chewing on. I'm happy to answer any questions. And also you'll see the bones of this do come from a robust needs assessment. So it's a data-driven decision that we made when we move forward, and that had to be part of my grant proposal. No questions? Yes, Daniel.
So quick question, this might be a stupid question, but when we talk about
I love it.
unhoused individuals, I assume that means kids and families who are going to those schools, or just unhoused individuals who are in that neighborhood or community?
We'll go to the schools. And you'll find that in the community schools, there are clusters of them very close together, just kind of regionally, where we're starting to partner together. And let's say Kelly has a pantry on a Wednesday, Whitman has a pantry on Thursday. It's possible we create a system where we can kind of support each other and complement each other on schedules and resource and all that too, because some of these schools are really close together. So that's been worked on. So it's kind of yes and.
Okay, cool.
And there was a longer description, like a 2-pager that was also attached on the webpage too, that has a little more detail. Do we have any other questions for Carmen Williams?
I just do want to put a plug, because you can be a great activist group as well. A lot of our food supports are also run by Sun in our schools. There's about to be a massive Sun cut from the city and the county. So that won't happen in the same way. And I don't say that, and as much as you want to advocate to the city and the county to Sun, I would highly encourage all communities and family groups to do that. Just know that some sites, they have Oregon Food Bank working through, or an organization through Sun for a pantry, and that might go away if they lose their sunlight. So anyway, we're also trying to troubleshoot and think through those things in case it does come to fruition. Yes, Daniel.
I have one more quick question about that. So if we went with some of these options where you're talking about 20 schools or whatever number of schools, how do you guys determine which schools need the food pantries the most?
So out of the 20 schools that I started with, I've already taken inventory of where they're at with their food supports. So for example, Chapman had nothing. And so I worked with Lift Up, which is an organization that primarily serves the West Side, and it's that part of town. And so working with them and creating a partnership, they now have a space they're getting space together for a pantry. They have pop-up markets, they have dry goods. So we're building those partnerships. They can only do so much because our food organizations across Portland, they are at a certain capacity. They have staffing issues themselves, they have inventory issues. Their funding is getting cut here and there. Grants are an issue. They operate off of grants and donations quite frequently. So, we can set up partnerships and have beautiful things happen. And there's also a ceiling of how much they can do. So wherever I can complement something that's currently in place or fill a gap where there's nothing in place, but I've taken inventory of every school to figure out where that is, just so I know when I go into the community, I know what I'm asking for, and for what site and which way.
I wonder if Daniel knows that the 20 community schools that you're serving are all Title I elementary schools as well, right?
Yeah, there's 2 K-8s and 18 Title I elementary schools.
So that was in our previous meeting where she listed out the schools. I can.
And those were picked at some point based off of a needs assessment as to which ones would serve the most unhoused people or something like that.
Yeah, I had to do demographics data on socioeconomic as well. I mean, their title status, right? But then also who is doesn't have the partnerships as much. He doesn't have some of these other pieces, but 20 covers quite a lot of elementary school.
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And then David, I'm gonna take your question, and then my link did show up, so I'll jump on that in a minute.
Okay,
But go ahead.
this is actually a quick question. And it's kind of an aside, but how long has the community schools, you don't call it a program, so strategy, whatever model,
Yeah,
how
strategy's
long has
great.
that been in place?
So I worked at it as just my site when I was Fabian principal for many years, but me moving to the central office to bring this to scale started in August. So it is at the very beginnings right now, and it is a long game for some schools, and some schools are just like chomping at the bit. So where we arrive and where we go depends a lot on the actual community.
My son's in high school and he went to Vestal, and it seems
Okay.
like a lot of these things that you're talking about for community schools was integrated in at that time when he was there.
Yes.
So
Yeah, there was this 21st century schools thing that happened at one point in time in Oregon. It dropped off for various reasons with PPS, but that did kick off some of this thinking, and some of those small schools kind of fad, I guess, trend in education did kick this off a little more community-oriented programming. This Vestal is one of my schools. And when I move forward, I'm hoping I can move this also to feeder patterns where we have middle and high schools involved as well.
Thank you.
So I hate to leave when people have questions, but I don't see multiple hands. So I'm going to feel like this is a good time for me to slip into my other meeting, another Zoom. But you know how to get a hold of me, and Robin knows how to get a hold of me, and there is more content available if you need it. And I'm happy to come back anytime. Just let me know. So thank you for all you all are doing, and have a good night.
Thank you. Well, we're going to go back up to the top and have Deborah Kafori give a few remarks, because she also, I think, has a 6 p.m. meeting that she is waiting to join. And then, yeah, we'll hand it over to Deborah, and if you have questions for her.
Thanks so much, Robin. Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Kafori. I'm the Chief of Staff at Portland Public Schools. And as a couple of side notes, I'm wearing a Jefferson Democrats t-shirt tonight because you may or may not know that the Lady Demos won their semi-quarterfinalist basketball game today. It's state tournament. So Friday, they're going to be playing for the semifinals, which is really exciting to have a PPS school in that competition. And then also I'm going to be jumping off this call to go to my second job in my free time on my personal computer, which is advocating and working for the May 2025 bond. So I can't talk to you about that on this computer, but know that that is happening. And I can actually answer any technical questions anybody has about it. So Robin had reached out to me about some questions that folks had about some of the different areas to fund with the $1 million that we're looking to allocate this year. And I just wanted to kind of give you a perspective from where I sit. And one of the things that I think I wanted to start off by saying is that you all have a really, really tough job. And I'm not sure that you even realized when you signed up for this how difficult it was going to be, but you're taking a crash course, a PhD level course in what PPS does, and you've got just a few weeks to figure this out. And I know it's really tough, but I'm going to push you just a little bit to tell you how important it is. We really need to figure out a way to invest this $1 million and to set a framework. So it's not just about investing in money, but to set a framework that's going to help us with fundraising in the future. This is a brand new system, as you all know. I don't need to tell you that. And so you're not only building the plane while you're flying it, but you're also, being the flight attendants and packing the plane with the bags. That you're doing it all at the same time. So I just want to let you know that I'm here to help if there's any way that I can be helpful in these decisions you have to make. So there were a couple questions, my understanding from a prior meeting about some of the areas to fund, like potentially a lobbyist to help with legislative session. And this, of course, this is near and dear to my heart because I have our government relations team under my area. And I will say that actually, I don't know that that would be the best use of these dollars this session. We currently have a full-time lobbyist, government relations staff person, Lisa Merrick, who's doing an outstanding job. And then we have a contract lobbyist firm that we hire during session to help us with bill tracking and to have somebody who's in the building in the Capitol 24/7, kind of as eyes and ears. And then this year, I had some money in my budget and I used it to hire an additional contract lobbyist who's just working for us for the session. Her name is Claudia Black, and she is arguably, or in my opinion, not arguably, the best lobbyist in Salem. So it is a very challenging session, and I just don't know that having more people, more hired guns for the district is best use of your dollars. I will tell you that I would be happy to discuss with any of you, and we are working on a parent strategy, because I really think this is going to be one of those years where protests outside of Ways and Means committees with signs and people really going all in with our legislators, because they're going to try to take the easy way out this year. I can feel it. They're already saying, and I don't feel it, I hear it. They're already saying things like, oh, it's this federal government dollars are there's too much uncertainty, so we really don't want to allocate any more money for schools. Well, that's a ridiculous argument. I mean, I get where they are coming from, but I also think we're going to be cutting at Portland Public Schools, and $40 million is going to hit hard, as you all well know. So that's the livest question. Happy to answer any questions about that. There was a question about whether we should use some of the money for fundraisers. And I think that's a great idea. I don't know that we need to spend too much of it, because I think $1 million obviously is a lot of money, unless you're talking teachers, and then it's not a lot of money. But using some of those dollars to do some Kickstarter fundraisers to really get the word out about the fund and to get parents excited about the possibilities. And we need to have the kind of framework that you all are developing to help us in those fundraising efforts. But I definitely think using some of the money for a fundraiser is a great one. And then there was another question about whether investments could be in program or in FTE, and you can do either. You can do one or the other, or you can do a combination of some. So I think that's all the questions I was here to answer, but I'm happy to take any other questions. And I see a couple of hands up. Suzanne?
Thank you, Deborah. Do we have to use all of the $1 million this year? Do we have to use it for the 25-26, or could any of it be sat on for maybe for like a larger fundraising goal for the 26-27 school year?
I'm going to ask Robin to jump in here.
I think that considering that these were collected last year from donors, I think that we need to allocate the majority of the funds based on donor intent and where they thought it would be invested in. That's not to say we couldn't make the case for some small amount. Maybe that would be carried over.
But isn't it correct that this is non-discretionary funds, that this is just this $1 million comes from the parent grant funds that would have been allocated based on the prior formula, and principals could use that however they wanted, and principals often sat on it because it wasn't enough money to fund anything that they needed. So they would sit on it until it was funded like a 0.1 something or other.
Yeah, so we don't know, we're going to need to make our recommendation to the board and then they will decide yay or nay. So we could make that case. I just think that it would be a risk to hold back too much of the money because people are looking to see where this money is going for the future.
Yeah, and I think Robin's right that politically, I think rolling over too much of it doesn't look that great because people will say, hey, we can, parents in schools across our district right now would say, hey, we if you guys can't spend the money, I can tell you, I can tell you where I think we need to spend it. If you have a plan, if you're planful and you can say, we want to spread this out over, we want to put $30,000 away for the next 3 years to ensure that we have a strong fundraising base. I think that having a plan, being planful about it like that would definitely be an easier sell than just saying, we're not going to spend it all this year.
I just had a quick follow-up, which pertains to the first presenters, but I think Deborah can respond. I think we have 18 EAs that are being cut this year, or projected to be cut. So I was confused about why they were giving us a number for 83 schools, because I don't think we put EAs in high schools. I mean, how many elementary schools do we have? That would be a good number to have. And then just also, what is the cost? We can do the math now for 18 EAs.
I think they do have EAs in some high schools. So that was a request that somebody wanted to know how much would it take to have one in every building. So, but yes, you can do the math to figure out different scenarios. Daniel and then Sun, do you have questions for Deborah before she goes?
I was just going to ask, so Deborah, you're chief of staff for PPS. So, seeing as it's such a small amount of money in comparison to the overall budget, if you were to give any kind of advice to a committee like us as to how that would be spent in the most effective way, what would maybe be ideas? I know you're not the one deciding, but, what would you think of as ideas for that?
Oh, sure. Put me in the hot seat. No, I'm just kidding. I would actually look at it as, I think the framework, and I'm just using that phrase, I don't know what phrase y'all have been using, for the future outlying years of what we could, something that you think is going to grab people's attention that we can use as a fundraising tool for the fund moving forward is almost in some ways more important than what you spend it on this year. And Robin, maybe sending me some text saying, zip it. But I think that is really going to be the important thing. And that's where your own, I think, gut in this comes in to say, I want to look at this from different perspectives. I want to look at this from the perspective of a parent at Lent or Cesar Chavez, but I also want to look at this as a perspective of a parent from Lincoln or Dunaway, as what is going to grab people and say, we want to contribute to the overall goal of PPS. So again, I think that kind of vision is almost more important than where you're going to spend these dollars, but there definitely is a need. Yeah, it's hard to say EAs versus food pantry. Although doing something that, again, you think we could fundraise for in the future, that is, I love the food pantry idea but I don't know that that's really a long-term commitment that PPS is going to make. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Deborah, just a quick question. You were saying that with this $1 million, we don't have to necessarily invest in the FTE, and programs are fine. And with the fund being a 501c3, does the fund have an endowment currently? like, would it be possible to put 10% of this into an endowment, to start an endowment, and moving forward every year we put 10%, which then we could use, the proceeds from that to help either fundraise or, if it grows large enough, to fund FTEs.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I will also add that, and so yes, you can. And one of our school board members, Gary Hollins, may come out of the off the dais and kiss you if you say this, because this has been his thing that he's been advocating for, looking at how universities and other institutions have some kind of a down. I think it's been hard for PPS to think about starting one, just because we've been in, we're always in this budget cut. So when you have the money to be able to say, how do we think proactively for the future, that definitely could be something to think about.
And just to follow up, because I believe, we would be able to, the fund would be able to partner with, Oregon Community Foundation. And I think, with the other nonprofits I've worked with in the past, I think, they just require, I think, a minimum of 25,000 to start an endowment. And hopefully they would be able to guide us, but it does seem like if we can make it grow, then it would be a long-term kind of, hopefully, solution, instead of just having to raising $1 million every year to fund 18 EAs.
Yeah, and if that's the direction you guys are interested in going, we can definitely, as staff, we can spend some more time looking into it.
Can I ask one question too, Deborah, before you go?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. Hi.
It's
hard
I
for
was
me to
curious.
see people.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was at a PTA meeting last night, and I got the question because I'm on this committee. The principal said, "Oh, I'm hearing from all these other principals about maybe we'll get more headcount. What are you guys planning?" So my sense from that was that people are expecting us to allocate this as headcount. Have you been hearing anything? And, along those lines or along different lines, that people have expectations? I mean, the name of this committee is, Committee for Distributing Headcount. So just kind of curious what the word on the street is. I was surprised to hear that they were so tuned in to what we were doing to be asking me about it.
Yeah, that is really interesting, because I have not heard that. And maybe they don't realize that $1 million doesn't go very far when funding FTE, but I hadn't heard that.
It may be a desperate wish. We were talking about, the cuts for next year, and that the principal was giving a presentation on it. And I think it was sort of like, principals have been asking what if there's any help coming from us for headcount.
Yeah, I feel for them. I mean, we've spent a lot of time this year doing things a little differently at the district with our new superintendent, and engaging the principals really fully early on. And so they've known, they've had a chance to weigh in, which is great. And it's also heartbreaking news. And that's why, I mean, I think, as I said earlier, this is really important to do for the future, but also making sure that we have a strong parent lobby voice, and writing your legislators and engaging them is also going to be really critical. And that's probably, I won't say it's still going to be challenging, but it's the chances of getting enough money to actually add bodies back to classrooms. That's really the game changer.
Well, thank you, Deborah, for hopping in here, and we may invite you back for next week.
Yeah, I'm happy to come anytime. And if folks have questions about this or any other topic, Robin, or it's dkafori@pps.net. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to be of assistance. And again, thank you for the work that you all are doing. I really appreciate the time that you're giving to our kids. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm gonna respect our other presenters' times. We have Dr. Emily Glasgow has returned and brought her colleagues, Darcy Soto, Director of Academic Programs, or Learning Acceleration, I think, and Carla Hudson, Program Administrator for Learning Acceleration. So I'm going to switch to the other slide deck. Did you want me to present, Darcy? Did you?
I think that I have, let me see if I can. I
Oh, I
realized
have to allow you, yes.
I'm not sure. Sometimes my computer. Hi, good evening, everyone.
Why don't or do you want Robin to just do it, Darcy? Is that easier?
There was like there was one little number error on the slides that I sent to Robin. So Emily, if you're able to present and you can present the slide deck that I sent to you.
Yes, I
don't know
have
if Robin, if you made a copy of it, there was like just a number error.
Oh, okay, that's why it wasn't going to the video. Okay.
I just have to find it. Hold on.
I just chatted it to you, Emily.
Yeah. Meanwhile, hello, everybody. I was just going to quickly frame up the conversation, then turn things over to Darcy and Carla. I think I met most of you last week. And last week we talked about PK-12 literacy and kind of just got an overview of what is in place, what's already been invested in, what is moving strongly, where there might be some gaps. And then when I left, you guys you had a lot of questions and you left me with, we'd like to hear more about what some specific investments could look like. And I heard you last week really asking about like, what could we invest in that would touch kind of as many students at as many grade bands in as many schools as possible, that's maybe not FTE, but that would fill some of these identified academic program gaps that we have around our core priorities. So that's what I took back to our team, and our learning acceleration team is here tonight, but we did talk with our 6th through 12 colleagues who are kind of have the equivalent of my job in the secondary space. And so what we're bringing back is not a proposal, but is just sort of a menu of options of ways that we could work at different grade bands, filling different needs around our academic priorities with some numbers attached and with some dollar amounts attached so that you can see how much would certain investments cost and start to think about them. I am going to now try to pull the slides up and let Darcy start introducing herself, and maybe Carla introducing herself while I do that.
Thanks, Emily. Well, good evening, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I'm Darcy Soto. I'm the Director of Learning Acceleration, which is embedded in our PK-5 core academics team and includes programs like high impact tutoring, summer acceleration academy, and our tag services, which are K-12 tag services. I will let Carla introduce herself and then we'll get into it.
Hi, thanks so much for having us tonight. I'm Carla Hudson. I'm a program administrator for our Learning Acceleration Department, and I work primarily with high impact tutoring and our Summer Acceleration Academy.
Great. Thanks, Carla. So we'll just, we have one slide that's got kind of like the 3 different grade bands that we're thinking about in terms of where we were seeing those gaps in support that we could name. And then I'll go into each one with a little bit of detail and also leave you with the slides so that you can explore the resources a bit. So as we think across the grade bands in terms of gaps in services to students that we really see as being a high need and also really high leverage practices. One of those that's also really aligned with our superintendent's advanced literacy plan is the intersection of increasing early literacy skill development and family engagement. And there is a platform, it's an app that is being used in some large districts across the country. We are involved in a number of national organizations around these level of supports, learning acceleration supports. And this is a platform that's come up several times as being a really promising practice. And they have some really interesting, really promising data coming out of large school districts like Houston ISD, LA Unified Schools is using the platform. It's called Paloma Learning. And so in a minute, we'll get into what that looks like, but it is a, you can sort of think of it as a platform that supports parents to serve as tutors to their students in 15-minute increments a day. So both supporting that foundational literacy, those early reading skills, and family engagement. And it's a sort of that go home and do your homework of reading 15 minutes a day, but scaffolded for families to be involved in that. Our second area of need that we're seeing is that middle school readiness around literacy. So we have, we are seeing lots of movement and promising practices in our K-5 reading work. And we know that we still see some gaps for our students who are leaving 5th grade and going into middle school, still with some gaps around foundational literacy. And those gaps are a real danger area for preventing students from being successful in their 6-12 careers in our schools. And so one practice that we have a couple of schools that are using in the district is high impact tutoring on a virtual level with Ignite Reading. And we have we've gone and visited the schools where that is happening and seen students, one-on-one with a live virtual tutor. It's a really interesting way to get that need met. It's 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And so we'll take a look at that a little more in depth as well. And then the final area is increasing success in high school algebra. We know based on lots of great longitudinal data that success in algebra, success in 9th grade math, which for most of our students is algebra, is a really strong predictor of high school success in general and on-time graduation rates. And we know that we have students who are leaving 8th grade in danger of not being successful in algebra. The other piece that is a gap there for our high school students in 9th and 10th grades is that the district doesn't have currently a platform for assessment that is, outside of the classroom, right? An assessment like MAP, but at the 9th and 10th grade level for math. So we know that high school algebra success is a really strong indicator of high school success, but we don't really have a great way of quantifying and understanding how our students are doing there. So IXL Digital Math is a tool that can help us with that. This is a video that's we don't have to watch the video right now, but I wanted to provide it to you. It is a short video about Paloma. Paloma is an app that enables families to deliver kind of a short burst of tutoring in both reading and math. So it's 3 days a week reading, 2 days a week of math. You can tailor that to your needs. It sends families a text message with a link to their daily tutoring session. It is personalized to the student's needs based on an assessment. And also students can pick an avatar that represents, their ethnic or racial profile. Each session has, the I do, we do, you do pattern of learning. And one of the things that we are really excited about this, potential use of this is that it provides the district with some data around how students are doing and also how families are using this tool. Yeah, I was going to say, I want to leave that for you there and let you take a look at that video at your leisure. And the website is also linked there on the first page. So I'm not going to, talk you through these numbers exactly, but these are just some options for, how many students we have. So we have just under 6,000 students in kindergarten and first grade. If we were to provide them all with a license for Paloma, this is the cost. This is costed out at $60 a year per student, which is the 12-month cost of supporting students with this app throughout the whole year. There's also an option for that to be $50 a year for a 10-month of service. And then options B and C are by grade level. And of course, there's any number of spaces in between of, how many students could be served, prioritizing schools based on assessment data or prioritizing different grade levels. It is just K2, this platform.
If I could jump in and give a couple of quick details about this program that makes it really special is it's offered not only in English, but in 14 other languages for all parents to be able to access. And so it would give the directions to the families in their identified language and then support their students in English development.
Thank you, Carla. Thanks for jumping in. And do you want to talk about Ignite?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So one of the exciting things about Ignite is that it really does provide individualized instruction for students who are getting ready to go to middle school. When you look at these videos, oftentimes you'll see them utilizing younger students, but this really has been a successful tool with our older students as well, particularly those who need foundational literacy skills to be successful in middle school. And that means that they're working on the word level and sentence level fluency for reading. And so this really will help them have a strong foundation in reading before they head off to middle school. Like Darcy said, it's 15 minutes a day. It's a virtual tutor, but it's the same virtual tutor every day. At the schools that we've seen this successfully happening, students are doing it 15 minutes before school starts at their at breakfast time, or they can do this also during their WIN block for 15 minutes per day. Let's see, what else? Oh, they have monthly data meetings to talk about the individual progress of every student that's participating with their principal, with their interventionist, with their reading specialist. So really all of those stakeholders in the school.
The vision for this would be that it could be embedded during the school day, during WIN block. Some schools at Irvington, for example, they have piloted it at breakfast time. So they have a teacher who's set up the computers and gets students on. One of the advantages of Ignite is that they have tutors from all over the country, and they can accommodate multiple, different types of schedules. And they have a lot of tutors that match our students' racial and ethnic profiles. And it's really fun. Carla and I have been to observe this happening, and it's really interesting to see students, developing relationships with a tutor in New York, for example, or in Philadelphia, and having a quick conversation at the beginning of their session about, what's going on in that neck of the woods. And all of those tutors are background checked, and, the sessions are recorded, and there's safety protocols in place. But it's a really interesting model that is fairly cost effective. One-on-one tutoring is, one of the most expensive types of programs that we can provide for students, of course, because we have an adult working one-on-one with a student. The per student cost is about $1,200 per year. And so we've costed out here based on assessment data in our district around fifth grade students who are in the, the lower 20% of our MAP growth data, and who need foundational literacy support. So that's about 300 students across the district. And so thinking about prioritizing those students, or potentially, a smaller number of those students with that Ignite would be the cost that you see here.
And the really incredible thing about the high impact tutoring model is that we see it not only impact our students' ability to grow in the skill that they're being tutored in, but it really also impacts their attendance rates. And so tons of research has gone into high impact tutoring and the results, and increasing attendance is one of the benefits as well. It's also the most impactful intervention that we can do with students because they're receiving that small dose of reading intervention every day, but 5 days a week over the course of a school year, or until they have become proficient in those skills and then they graduate out. And then the seat would be available to another student that needed this service as well.
Yeah, thank you. We can provide also for the group some additional literature around kind of like the research and the background to some of these programs as well. And the high school option that we've brought today is a program called IXL that is currently being piloted in some of our high schools. As I mentioned, we have kind of a couple of gaps. One is providing, a second level of support for students who are in algebra for Algebra Success. Any of you who have or have had high school students, that's all three of us here from the PK5 team. When your student is struggling in math, it's really challenging. Particularly if you don't have a math background, or they just tend to really be impacted by that work, right? It's a really terrible feeling to start high school and to feel so behind. And the research really matches that. Really strong out of the University of Chicago, long-term research around high school success and algebra success. So the IXL platform is a really cost-effective measure that does a couple of things. One is that it provides an assessment that helps teachers, administrators understand how students are doing in algebra, which is a gap that we have right now. And it also provides opportunities for students to get additional instruction on a skill that they haven't been able to demonstrate proficiency in. So they're in their algebra class, they've just taken an assessment, and there's a particular skill or a particular standard that they're not at grade level yet. They're not at mastery yet. They're able to go into IXL. The teacher can assign to the student a particular standard to work on. They can work on that standard. They can demonstrate mastery within that app or on their Chromebook. And then the teacher can then give them credit for that within their gradebook. So it kind of helps in the moment sort of credit recovery, and can also be used for credit recovery after the fact. We want to catch it, right? We want to catch our students before they get into needing summer credit recovery, but it's difficult when students get behind in the school year to get caught up. So it's kind of a opportunity for like an intercession of, oh, this assessment didn't go well. I have an opportunity to demonstrate proficiency in this skill and then get back on. So here are a couple of options based on just the number of students in 9th and 10th grade. It's about 7,000 students across those two grades, across all of our schools. As you can see, it's a pretty cost-effective option for that service, and would provide some really interesting data, and I think good work for expanding a pilot that is currently in place. And I think that's what we have for you in terms of slides and opportunities that we have kind of thought up to match those needs that were identified as being areas of interest. And we'd love to hear your questions and come back with more resources or additional options. Anything to add, Carla, Emily?
No, just to say that, we tried to, there's a world in which all these things could happen with the amount of money you have, right? Or some combination of them, or I wasn't on for Carmen's presentation, but where you could potentially piecemeal together a package of things that would touch a lot of students and families very directly in very tangible ways. And so we'd love to hear your questions. Like Darcy said, there are more such things. These are ones we would highly recommend, but there are more if there's other things you'd like to hear about.
just in case people are trying to do the math, I did put together a slide. So I'll just share that. So this is, oh, that's not my, you're seeing my desktop, aren't you? Hang on a second, sorry.
I think related to what you're going to show us is my question, which is, do we have access to your slides? Because I have the presentation open from Robin, but I don't see your same slides. And it looks like the math numbers are a little bit different. I would be curious to kind of dig into,
Yeah,
you
this is
know,
the thing I mentioned. Yeah, I
what'd you
apologize.
say? Oh,
That's
no
the
problem.
that's the correction that I mentioned to Emily and Robin at the start. So it's the
Robin, you'll
math-
have to, maybe you can, I think you like to share PDFs, right? So I don't know if you want to make a PDF of Darcy's updated slides and share it with the group afterwards so they can access the updated information.
Yeah. Oh, I thought just the link to the video would changed. I didn't.
Some of the numbers were incorrect on one of the charts, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
yeah, what Isla was just naming is the Ignite reading numbers should say 300 students at what was it? 360,000. It's 1,200 per student. So it's 300 students was about the number that we were able to sort of zoom in on today, looking at both MAP data and MAP fluency data of 5th grade students who were identified for additional support. So I apologize for the math error on that.
Yeah, so the one we
Are
shared
those
tonight is
annual
accurate.
fees? Are those annual fees? So if I'm like a kindergartner with it on my app, or I have the app, it's not going to carry over to first.
They're annual licenses. The Paloma one, we costed out at a 12-month license so that it would carry through the summer. You can also do a 10-month license, which is $10 cheaper per student if you want to just do the school year. These are all things that would be also interesting to pilot at scale in our system that either we haven't yet piloted or we only have tiny pilots of right now. And so it would be interesting. We'd get a lot of data from all of these. And so we could do a lot of sharing back and learning about what is fruitful, right? And what would be worth continuing funding for if it's available.
I want to just, I think that I heard in that last question, a question of like, is if it's annual and if that goes away, and if you for each of these, if the contract, if we continued the contract, the data wouldn't be lost. My Paloma app would show my progress from kindergarten and 1st grade, and it would continue on.
Does the Paloma app require additional support personnel to kind of implement that?
There's
No,
so go ahead, Carla.
No, there is a school support team that is able to help recruit families to participate if we see participation not at the levels we would like it to be. But it's very straightforward. They email the parent, or excuse me, they text the parent with the videos that explain each lesson every day. So it's just a email. You push on that button and it plays the video for you, the instructional video for you.
Isla, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wanting to be clear on the differences. So Paloma is an app that goes to the parents. They do it after school. It's a way to have the parents engaged in learning. The virtual one-on-one is live video, but it happens during school hours. Is that, or is it after? That's during school.
It could be after. We would want to implement it during school hours. That is where the research on high impact tutoring is showing the most positive impact.
Okay. And the last one is a testing resource development, which seems easier to fit in. So
And
Yeah,
it's just to be clear, the IXL there is an assessment component to it, but it's really more of a practice component. It's that teachers can assign like this is IXL, student needs to practice this skill some more and get some real-time feedback on it before they're ready to be reassessed on it in the classroom. So the teacher can assign digital practice to the student on specific skills, which they could do at school or at home.
Oh, I like your numbers. It's very well designed to be about 1 million. Coincidentally.
I think, you know, we have a large system, and as we think about, you know, serving the most students, with a resource, you know, that's what we're looking for too. So I think we really share that goal. And one of the things that I think is exciting about, you know, something like Paloma and about IXL is that, you know, for a relatively small investment, we can serve a lot of students. And the data that's coming out of Houston and LA is really exciting, around, you know, just the number of minutes of exposure to reading. And we know that that's really positively correlated with long-term reading success. So yeah, we're trying to get the most bang out of our buck across the system.
One detail I think we didn't say, and then we'll call on the other hands, is that both Paloma and IXL correlate and align with our curriculum that's happening in the classroom. So the same like scope and sequence of skills. So in kindergarten, if they're working on the sound, that's the same sound that they're going to be working on at home with their parents and practicing. And so that it's reinforcement and practice of those same skills, which is really nice.
And IXL is aligned with our illustrative math curriculum.
At the high school level, yeah. Sachin and Daniel, do you guys want to go?
Sachin, you can go ahead.
I was just curious, with the correct figures for the price, because it's a little cheaper if I remember from what you said. How much do we end up with spare compared to the current pricing on that slide?
Yeah, and I can share the deck just with the updates here in the chat for serving. And I think the other thing that I want to make sure that we say is that, you know, we've selected kind of a number of students based on what we see in terms of like assessment data and achievement data. And there's a range, right? It could be, oh, thanks, Robin. It could be anywhere in between these spaces, but yeah, there you go.
Well, and again, like we showed you, like Paloma, you could just do all kindergarten students and not first grade, and right, like any of these things can be scaled out differently, and so we sort of tried to present some options.
Right.
I think the exciting thing about these options is kind of what Deborah Kafori was touching on, is that it reaches a lot of our families in our school district. And so not only is it a great way to spend money that we have for this year, but it's a great way to raise funds for additional school years, because you know, all of these are exciting opportunities for families across PPS. We really reach and touch a lot of the families in, with these options.
Daniel, go ahead. You guys are very patient hand raisers. Good wait time.
You had just mentioned the data coming out of the other cities that have done some of these programs. We don't have time for you to go in a ton of detail, but maybe just like cursory details of like some of the improvements or things that you saw out of that, and then maybe places that we could look at the detailed data if we wanted to.
Yeah, I'd love to send along some, you know, some PDFs. Off the top of my head is not the best place to come to for sharing this kind of data. But the minutes collected of, you know, student time with books stuck out in my mind as like an interesting point and also a really like strong predictor of, implementation success. But we can get you the LA Unified and Houston data that was shared with us, and just get that in black and white in front of you so that you're able to see that, the actual data. But it's about, foundational literacy and increasing in skills that are taught along with the curriculum. So kind of a partnering to the curriculum and also exposing children to just additional minutes of reading. So we'll get those to Robin.
Thank you.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, we can let our team go. Any last remaining questions? Or we can move on to our discussion after they go, and we can follow up with other questions and the data as well.
Yeah, we're happy to, again, as we mentioned, provide answers to questions, and we can send along some data, and also happy to look into additional options, right? If there is something that, like a question of like, well, does this option exist at this grade level? There's lots available and out there, and we would prioritize options that are aligned with our curriculum, that, provide cohesion for our students, and that, serve the most students, and that align with our, our ODE standards around things like high impact tutoring services, and, that are greenlit and solid resources. So I'm happy to do that, and also answer any questions that come off. And I also just want to say that I appreciate all of you working for all of our kids. We're all on this team, PPS parents, really proud PPS parents and proud advocates for the system, and just appreciate you doing this work.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you.
Thank you, all three of you, for joining us and sharing your expertise.
Yeah. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so I had put together like 3 different tables of scenarios, because when I was looking at their presentation, I was kind of like, how does this all add up? But then they had changed some of the numbers. So what I had posted was incorrect. So I just changed it like while we were talking. And then that's when I showed, I showed the table again. That would because the error was an over estimation, so there was more room in the budget. So that brought the slides down. I just deleted the first scenario, and I also created a slide with the educational assistance. So I just wanted to share that real quick, and then see if people have any other questions. So this was their option A for the 3 different groups, comes to 784,420. So there could still be the investment of the 250, which is the lower amount that was in the food pantry request. They had 350,000 as option 1 or 250,000 as option 2. So that is how that aligns. And then what happened? Where did I had this educational assistant slide. With the estimate for the 11 educational assistants, or potentially 22 if you were going to split an educational assistant between 2 schools, which is obviously not ideal. That estimate is at $1 million. They kind of like rounded off because that's based on an average salary. And then there could be the remaining amount for what we had talked about with fundraising or marketing of the event. The other scenario in the slides now is not relevant because the numbers changed. Anyway, I will stop sharing that and go to see if there's any discussion. Suzanne?
So what I'm really struggling with is we're supposed to be coming up with it was first called a formula and now it's called a method of how to distribute whatever funds are raised. And I feel like we're kind of being pushed in the direction of just figuring out how to spend this $1 million. So my ask is that, I mean, our deadline is like next week, March 19th. Am I correct about that? And I'm just wondering, can we push this out? Because there's no way we can decide on this. I love Sun's idea, the endowment, but if you've even set aside $100,000, I did some quick research. Endowments are getting like 9%. That would be just a $9,000 increase in the funds. Like you have to put a lot of money in for an endowment to work. But I'm not saying I don't like that idea. I think it's great. How do we turn the conversation to starting to put on paper a guide for because it's the board that's going to approve or turn this down, that one addresses getting all PPS families at all of the schools interested in fundraising. So the tech idea kind of stands out because it could be distributed to all kindergarten and first graders, so that's something that hits all schools. And I think that these presentations have been great because we're hearing like, well, maybe EAs aren't the way to go because we're never going to be able to replace all the EAs that are being cut. And then how do you decide which schools get the 11 EAs when 18 are being cut? So anyhow, I'm not saying that it's been a waste of time. I'm just saying I feel that our group is being asked to do something that's really too difficult in too short of a period of time, and that we should do it right.
Okay. Session.
So I was thinking, it only is about 750,000 to get all the programs that these people just suggested, for all those like online stuff and the IMBEC tutoring. So we could probably just put the other around 250,000 into an endowment, and then it's making a return of close to 30,000, which is like pretty solid. I think it's 30,000. It might not actually be 30,000, but somewhere around there in return if it's getting about 9%. And that's a pretty big one. And then you have these programs that are covering kind of all the grade levels, so to speak. So I think that could be pretty good.
Yeah, typically an endowment is like given for that purpose. It's not typically taken out of monies that are raised. Maybe we'll take Sun and Isla's comments, and then Trina, maybe you could tell them a bit about your job of what you were telling me earlier, just as an example of an endowment, because you manage the largest one in the state. So, Sun.
So I have a similar question as what Suzanne had, in that I guess is the purpose of our, as an advisory committee this year, to create a formula or a method for the fund moving forward to figure out how to distribute its funds, or is this a committee that will meet each year to figure out how to distribute the funds for that year?
Yeah, I think because of this being a new year and a transition year where we didn't get started until January, ideally, the way the policy is written is that it would be determined at the beginning of the school year. So then if any fundraising that happened that year, people would know what they were giving towards. I think the idea was that we would select something this year that would invest these initial dollars and people could see, the impact that it's actually something that's happening, and that it would also be what the goal would be to continue the investment for next year. But the PAC could look at it like, let's say it's not working next year, and we would be meeting year round. And so I think in the charter, it's to meet quarterly at least. So you could change direction midstream conceivably, but ideally we are choosing something that we're going to stick with for at least a couple of years to see if this is working and what the impacts are. That was the concept.
So along those lines, I would say, with a bit of a background in fundraising, maybe not to the level of Trina, but, I've always learned, people give for their reasons and not why we want them to give. So my concern would be, depending on how we distributed this, and I kind of heard this from Deborah as well, the politics of it, how we distribute this $1 million with the majority of the donations coming from a small percentage of schools. Moving forward, if we didn't distribute it in a way that those donors felt as if they'd been, heard or whatnot, then, I would fear that the fund would essentially die because people would quit giving because they would feel as if, 80% of their donations weren't going towards their school potentially. I mean, right now, 66% is going to the schools and 33% to the fund. But what if we flip that, and 33% goes to the schools, and we have 66%, and then maybe 10% to an endowment. But I think we have to understand that, if donors don't feel like their money's going towards what they're donating for, we'll just lose them, and then we may just lose out on all the donations moving forward in the future. But that's all I just wanted.
Okay, thanks. Trina, are you?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to so I don't fundraise. The people that fundraise are saints. I manage funds, and that's a little bit different than fundraising. I'm the finance and accounting manager for the 1803 Fund, which is one of the largest endowments. We are an investment fund is our official area of nonprofit, meaning we are taking the money from the endowment, investing that money, and then using the investments to funnel back into the community. And that model kind of helps us sustain and have a long-term effect, instead of trying to spend what we were given and have that money just kind of be gone. We want to make sure that we are able to continually be able to give. So with that being said, you know, I think it is important. I feel like there's a lot of conversations, and my initial gut reaction is yes, and are we supposed to create a framework to model for folks moving forward? Yes. And was this a very short amount of time to do that? Yes. And do we have to give away $1 million? Yes. And do we have extra time? And that's the only no that I'm really kind of it's one of our, it's just the tensions, it's one of the tensions. We don't necessarily have the time to stretch this out because other cogs in the system have to also keep going. And so we don't want to delay in making a decision and that delay things moving forward for other folks. Also, we don't want to delay so much that the board decides that they're going to do whatever they want to do outside of what we recommend. Because at the end of the day, it's a recommendation. We are not the final say, really, of what's going to happen. So we have to be really impactful. We have to be really mindful, but we also have to be mindful of all the pieces and all the moving parts. And do I think that it's a lot? Do I think it's a heavy overhaul? Yes. I have also had 90 days to give away $64 million. This is only $1 million. I know this can be done. This can be done. I had 90 days to give away $64 million. I had to build the system. I had to hire people. And we had to create applications, vet the public, and then give away $64 million. I had 90 days. We can do this. This is not that.
Thank you, Trina. I wanted to say I am a fundraiser, so I appreciate that you think we're saints.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I do in my professional life.
Are fundraisers.
But I will say that is what, just so that people know why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking, is that we can pick whatever we want. But my only focus is whatever we pick, what is our message for next year? Like, what is the thing that we're picking that we're saying, okay, we're going to do food pantries. So how are we going to sell this next year? So we can like one thing, we can like two things, but I want us to always be primarily thinking about whatever we pick, how are we going to sell it to the parents next year to get them to donate to that thing? And we have to think, we need to pick the thing that is going to create continuity. So we just need to think about that message. So that's what I'm always thinking of when I'm looking at these programs.
But are we just selling to parents? Like, shouldn't we be selling to a bigger community than just the parents? Businesses, community organizations, people outside of the state.
Robin, I will say, I went to your website, and why does the other people get priority? I agree with you, Suzanne. When you go to the website, there's like a link for very specific programs that are not the champions. Why are we second billing?
Well, we don't have something to say, and that's what we want the group to decide.
Okay.
To have the thing to say. Of right now, it's a district-wide, it's the way to make district-wide. All of them are. The other they're all programs of PPS. All of the money goes to PPS. We're not competing, over, yeah. We are seeking donations from corporations. A lot of the corporations want to donate where their employees are giving. They do employee matching, but they also decide where they give their charitable giving and their marketing dollars based on where their employees volunteer and donate and give their time. That's why we're focusing on where our parent community will get behind it. It needs to be a movement. Just having a handful of people in a room, even if they're professional fundraisers, there's not that much money in the state. We are not San Francisco with tons of tech companies. We have relationships with the corporations. We talk with them, and there's a lot of apprehension. People don't know what the state's going to do. They don't know what's going to happen with revenue. We don't know what's going to happen to the federal government. There's a lot of, uncertainty right now around budgets and people they'll give their money where they see people are energized, where people care, where people are telling them, we want you to support this, not just the superintendent or the Board of Education or a couple of paid PPS employees telling them that this is where the money should go. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We ended on time last week. It's 7:10 right now. I will just say that the process with our getting things in front of the Board of Education is protracted. We're trying to aim for April 8th board meeting. It would be a first reading and they still wouldn't vote until May 1st. If we push this anymore, it's going to be June 1st. And I don't think we'll have anyone's attention by June 1st. It will be like summertime, school's out, so that is really like the clock. I could probably, get another week, but then that's spring break and nobody's going to want to meet over spring break. Do you want to meet over spring break? I kind of doubt it.
I'll meet over spring break. I don't care.
I mean, I'm not taking the time off, but I think a lot of people are. And I, also have other work to do. And these are a lot of meetings and a lot of prep and such. So it can't go on indefinitely. It would be different if it was spread out, if we were spread out over a whole year, but this has been very intensive, for all of us. So what I would love to do is put these ideas in front of some principals and get some feedback from principals. If you have other questions, if you can email them to me by the end of the week, and I can get them, send out an email when things are posted live, try to get things posted by Monday, the latest, for like the data that the team was saying that they would have. If you have other information or, that you want that we can bring forth to the next week's meeting, please get that to me as soon as possible so I can get that. And then we'll reconvene next Wednesday.
What are you getting in front of principals? I'm sorry.
Oh, the two slides with the two options of the EAs and then the program. Like, I don't think that they've seen, the idea of the tutoring that was presented. So the policy does ask for, it does say with feedback from principals, and I think it'd be better to do that now than to wait until after we've made a final decision. So that was what I was proposing there. If you have any other suggestions or information requests, please email me by the end of this week, but the earlier the better so that I can get it on time. Some of this stuff, I didn't post it because I didn't have it in hand. I posted as soon as I have it, so.
Can we all stay on and just continue chatting?
I would love to, but I'm gonna have to eat dinner at some point, so I'll need to leave in a bit. Also, I have homework, like a decent amount tonight.
Yeah.
I also have to make dinner for my daughter.
I just want to ask quickly, are we going to have presentations next week?
Not unless there's something there's a request. I don't have one lined up. I had Deborah Kafori said she could come, though.
Okay. So we can really do a deep dive into fundraising strategy, at least creating a tagline and figuring out which of these we feel more comfortable with. I feel like next week we should start voting on where we're swaying as far as how we're landing on some of these ideas, because we got a lot of stuff kind of swirling in the air. And so maybe figuring out how as a group we're landing and spending that time to kind of doing that work. Because the presentations are great, But at a certain point, we have to really dig in and say, well, what is the consensus? What is it that we want to see from the presentations that we've had? So I'm excited to get into that work, and I don't want to hold you guys any longer. So do you mind if we close the meeting, Robin?
No,
All right.
yeah.
Thank you guys. This has been a very insightful meeting. I'm very quiet. I don't know if you guys noticed. I love to take in information. So this has been very, very insightful for me. I hope you guys are energized from the presentations. And I hope next week you guys are ready just to get in and make those decisions. And we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.